Welcome to the space between heaven on earth. This is a companion podcast to Awakening Heaven on Earth, created as a space for reflection, conversation, and lived experience. Here, we enter the pause between knowing and becoming, between insight and embodiment, between heaven and earth. These conversations are not about answers or conclusions. They are about presence, about listening, about reasoning together, about meeting one another honestly in the unfolding journey of awakening. I'm your host, Sherri Keys. Again, welcome and thank you for entering the space between with us. Welcome to this episode of The Space Between. In our last episode, we explored what it means to rebuild with love, to begin creating systems and communities that reflect unity rather than separation. But systems don't transform themselves. They transform through people, through those that are willing to guide differently, to serve differently, and to lead differently. So this episode is called Leading with Love, Unity and Leadership. And when we hear the word leadership, many of us pretty much immediately start thinking about titles like CEOs or managers, teachers, public figures. But leadership, it really is a much bigger thing than a role. You know, every day we influence the world around us. We influence as parents, as friends, as coworkers, as members within our community. So the question is not, am I a leader? The question is, what kind of influence am I bringing into the world? So I'm going to start with this question for each one of you. And today we're joined by my son, Joel. Good to have you with us this week. And Joe Dermody and Sherri Keys. So when you hear the phrase leading with love, what's that conjure up in your mind? Who's somebody in your life who modeled that kind of leadership?
So for me, it's somebody who in their role doesn't take it, does it with a sense of servitude as opposed to being somebody who is over you. Somebody who does something out of love or does their work from a place of love as opposed to a place of just control. Somebody who modeled that kind of leadership for me would be you. And happy Father's Day to you, since it is today we're recording this. It's Father's Day. And, you were somebody who showed me leadership when as a young kid. You were in the military. You did that not because you necessarily wanted to, not because it was a choice that you were like, yes, I really love to be in this. You did it because you had to take care of mom and us, sister and I. So you did that from a place of love and servitude to us. And that's something I've always, thought about as an adult now. I have my own kids.
I feel exactly the same way. My stepfather, who raised me, he also is somebody that he didn't have to bring me in as his own, and he chose to, and he brought me in showing me so much love. And one of my favorite sayings that he used to tell me was, son, I can't tell you what to do with your life, but I can show you what that you don't want to do. And we did a lot of manual labor growing up around the house. He was very hands-on, a lot of DIY projects. And he was a sales engineer, but he did a lot of manual stuff around the house. We did a lot of patio projects. We did a lot of yard work, and I have learned from him that I don't want to be somebody that does concrete work. I don't want to be somebody that wants to move a wheelbarrow. I don't want to be somebody that wants to garden for a living, because I've done a lot of that growing up. And I'm very, very thankful and grateful for the lessons he's taught me. And honestly, I followed in his footsteps and went and got an engineering degree because of the way he taught, the way he helped me think logically. And it's a lot of that, just a wonderful experience growing up with somebody that led with love and, let me learn beside him. And it was a fantastic, fantastic experience.
Yeah, your story there makes me think of the Brad Paisley song talking about a stepdad. Basically the father he didn't have to be. So I feel that because I have a stepson as well. And it was for those people in the situations, it is a choice. It's not something where you have a kid naturally with that other person. They already have the child, and that's part of the package. So that's a special person. It's not easy sometimes, but the fact that he had a positive influence on you is awesome.
Absolutely.
All the conversations, I think we all start with some influence from our parents, good, bad, or indifferent. I had wonderful parents, and my mom and dad, just watching them raise us. And I'm going to speak specifically for my mom, because watching her be a matriarch for the family, she taught me to understand the difference between love and loving unconditionally. And there's truly a difference in that. And then understanding how do you give people grace in that process. And I think that's important because people hold so much inside them, and that those strong feelings of, of whatever that is, that the strong feeling that you have inside, those things that really don't matter. She's always taught us to look beyond that. She always would say, you do unto others as you want others to do unto you. And that has been kind of the foundation that I think has molded me into not only the person I am, the woman I am, but the mother that I am. And I hope that I will continue to be for my daughters.
Well, for me, it's interesting because I find that it's interesting so far that all of you have really chosen family as your examples. And I think most people, if they think of leaders, do they really think of their family as much as they would think of work or, leaders in some organization or government leaders or people that are outside of their family? And for me, there's not one that I can think of specifically, because I think I've been influenced by so many different people in different ways and in positive ways, that, they truly, if they cared enough to pull me aside and give me guidance and give me good instruction, I can think of probably 4 or 5 different specific experiences I had with different people in positions of leadership at different levels that totally changed my trajectory and how I was viewing not only myself, but my interactions with people and how I was affecting people. And they were all profound. They were all profound. And the only reason they did it is because they cared. They wouldn't have taken the time or the energy to do that with me if they didn't care. And that really has kind of jumped out at me, because to me, love is not an emotion. Love is action. It's a verb. It's something that we do or something we don't do that demonstrates love and leadership. And I find it interesting because in our workplace, I think we use that word a lot. And it's probably quite unusual for many people if they were to come into our little work area and hear us talking to each other about, hey, love you, at the end of a meeting, or, How many people at work tell each other that they love each other, or that they, and honestly, I mean it. We mean it. We do care. And I've had that with people in the military that I've worked with. There are people that I truly love them, and they loved me because of what they did for me or did not do for me that helped shape me. And in the business world, even there, I have come across less people that use love as a foundation for their leadership. And certainly in government, I think it's hard to find people who that's their primary focus is they do what they do out of love. There's so much influence in leadership for power and money and other things that motivate people to get themselves into different positions. But again, I hope that in this conversation, we can kind of change the perception of what we mean when we say leadership, and that when we talk about love, we're talking about action, how we act, what we do and what we don't do relative to people. So with that, I think as we go into this first section of questions, we're going to talk about how everyone is a leader. Everyone's a leader. Leaders are not necessarily defined by a position. So we often underestimate how much influence we as individuals have. Sometimes the absolute greatest leaders are not the ones with the loudest voices, right? They're the ones that have the most consistent presence in an environment. And it's that informal leader that people look to in many cases to see, well, what are they doing? How are they responding? And they use them as mirrors in some cases as well. So with this first question, when did you first realize that your actions or example was influencing other people?
For me, I feel like I keep bringing back the same type of experiences, but obviously I learned a lot during these moments. The first time I realized my influence on others would have been after Katie died. Before she died, I was a very quiet, very shy kind of kid. Just kept to myself. Had a small core group of friends. But then after she passed away, the spotlight was put on me and on our family, and people knew who I was, and I had no clue who they were just because of the whole experience and things that went on. So for people were looking to me in those moments to help them through it. I remember people just wanting to be together in those times, and wanting me to be there and be present and be a part of it. So that was one experience initially where I realized my presence was an influence to other people. And if I could be strong through this, they could be strong through it too. Another one for me was as I was going through my pharmacy training. And when I was actually in pharmacy school, for those who don't understand pharmacy, you basically have essentially 3 positions inside of a retail pharmacy, and it's essentially going to be a technician, an intern. Intern is somebody who's actively studying to become a pharmacist, and you have a pharmacist. And there's a dynamic there as far as what you can and can't do. So once I went into pharmacy school and became an intern, I now had more responsibility. And so what I was doing was, learning the job, and also essentially training the newer people and things like that. So starting to see my influence in a leadership role was definitely eye-opening for me.
I probably started to realize it back in high school. I had a core group of friends, and I started to realize that I had a lot of influence on what we did when we got together, and that I could make the. I don't want to use the word make. I had a lot of influence on what we did. I could normally get my way when we were trying to decide what we wanted to do, where we wanted to go. I learned pretty quick that I understood the dynamics and how to talk with people, and that helped to choose help me choose where we wanted to go and have them come along with us. So
For me, you realize it when people start valuing your voice, and it doesn't always have to be in a major type of leadership. But what I've come to realize in my mature stage in life is that it could be just the small things. Something as small as, being on a team call, and as people go around and they're, how are you doing? How are you doing? And kind of leveraging it to a level where I'm doing great. Thank you so much. And seeing how that set a foundation for how everyone else began to react and communicate in that same way. So something as small as that, and seeing how you can influence a person's perspective, state of mind for that moment, to me is a great example of a leadership. So that positive energy now is transferred to the team, and now that becomes something that everyone say. Something as simple as Happy Monday, and I do that a lot on my meetings. And now it brings a smile in some meetings because they're actually expecting that, and sometimes they even beat me to the punchline. Um, but I feel like that's, you know, how you influence people in such a positive way, even if it's something small as starting their day.
So I think with me, it's when you start seeing people mimic, right? They start mimicking things you say, things you do. And when they gravitate to you for advice, or in some cases, they'll just openly say, hey, you're having a lot of influence. I've had people come sometimes and say, there's something about you and I like it. So how can I have that and feel that? And I kind of do a double take when people say stuff like that to me, but at that point, you're influencing them, that they're watching you for a reason, because they think that there's something about you that they want to also have or enjoy or experience, because they see it in you, they see it through you. And that's usually a first indicator, when someone comes to you and asks for advice, or they come and ask for guidance, or they come and ask for you to tell them or share with them some reason why you're doing what you're doing. And you always have to be so careful at that point to I think, Joe, you kind of touched on this concept of realize that you're having that influence, but don't manipulate, right? You have to learn to not manipulate.
Use your powers for good.
Use it for good, because there's so many people, once they realize that they're having that kind of influence, will use it for bad, right? They'll use it to get things inappropriately necessarily from other people, because it's amazing how people, they want leaders. People want to follow leaders. And a lot of leaders, I don't think, understand that. They're actually looking to leaders for guidance and vision and direction. And the leaders are like, well, no, I don't want to. Well, yes, yeah, that's what they want from you. And they want you to give that.
Yeah. Makes me think of Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the problem is a lot of these people that are our leaders, I mean, a lot of them get into leadership roles because of that power. They want to lead for whatever reason, right? Some of them to manipulate, some of them because they truly care and they want to lead. The problem are the people, and they're not a problem, but some of them, I guess, are the ones that are the leading without knowledge that they're leading. Some of the big influencers out there, right? The ones that are online, and they are leading without really knowing they're leading. The ones eating Tide Pods back in the day, right? they're doing this as a joke a lot of the times, and all of these kids who are watching them thinking that, oh, that's a great idea. Well, no, it's not a great idea, but they're seeing all these people that they are idolizing online leading them down this path. And that's where the problem comes in, when they don't realize that they are leading without leading, right? I think it's very important to use your powers for good. If you have these, you're doing this in the public eye, you are leading, and it's be aware that you're leading.
So what makes someone a leader without a formal title?
It's somebody who has influence, somebody who has an effect on somebody's actions or how they think about their life. So, I mean, like you said, it means we all are leaders in different ways with different people. It's not just a title. It's not just a person who's in charge of something like that we have in our mind, like a business or a government title or anything like that. A parent is a leader. A coach is a leader, and I experienced that. And you bring that up when it made me think of when you mentioned somebody who imitates you or somebody who repeats something that you say. And I always wonder that sometimes with my soccer team that I coach, and all the things I say over and over and over, and it feels like they just never get it. And all of a sudden they'll repeat it, or they'll say, like Coach Joel said, do this. I'm like, they do remember. They are listening. They may not always show it, but I mean, they actually are. I am influencing them in some way. So yeah, influence is the biggest thing. So you can be a good leader and a bad leader based on, what you're putting out there, but you're influencing people. So like to Joe's point, those people who are, eating the Tide Pods, they're influencing people. It's not a good thing, but they're leading people in a way. And they don't have a title other than just internet personality or internet influencer. So yeah, it's influence is the kind of the crux of it.
Yeah, I agree. It's influence, inspires, guides others towards a shared goal, right?
I think it's being a good listener. I think all of those things I agree with, but being able to humble yourself to a point once you're aware that you have power and have influence to be able to listen, because it's through that listening that power or influence that you have is guided in the right way. Because I think that we all are on a constant journey of learning, and I think that even the best leaders still need to learn and gain knowledge and understand how to control that influence. And that comes with understanding and listening and caring.
Well, for me, it's interesting because I think I'm a leader. And in most cases, I can usually work myself into positions where I also have the title, except in business. And it's the most interesting thing to me that leaders in business struggle with putting me in a particular position. And I think that's because I intimidate them. Personally, I think I intimidate them. And it's interesting because leadership in business is different than, say, leadership in government or leadership in religion or leadership. I've been able to gravitate into leadership roles in every other part of my life. And I do have leadership roles in business. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I am an executive level person in business at this point. But it's there. And I think Joe and Sherri, who have worked with me now for some time, will recognize that happens. That there are just, and I think that brings up another issue with leadership, is that in some cases, people who are in formal positions of leadership are not necessarily the true leaders of an organization. And when we teach change management, that's one of the big things we teach people is you really need to understand who has what circle of influence. And the most important leaders you need to connect with are not necessarily people that are in positions with a title. They're informal leaders in the organization that will have more influence to help you get a change implemented than the people in those roles. And I find myself in business primarily to be influential, but it's not necessarily my title that drives that. So I think that comes from, again, demonstrating certain characteristics, demonstrating experience, demonstrating results, getting results that people can see, and working in a way that is collaborative, not competitive, right? When you work in a collaborative manner, people gravitate toward that. When things are hyper competitive, you start to create conflict and division and separation as a result of that. So I think those are two critical points. So let's jump into section 2 here. So let's start looking at the difference between old leadership, what we'll call old leadership, versus maybe what we'll now call unity-based leadership, where, a lot of traditional leadership has been built around hierarchy. Again, this is where, a hierarchy defines roles and positions and titles. And if you're not at this level in the hierarchy with that title, in some people's mind, you're not a leader. Well, in reality, I don't know that that's true. So direction in a hierarchy flows downward, where decisions are coming from the top, they're coming top down, and success is measured by results alone. But unity is asking us to expand that, I think, that definition of influence and leadership and direction and guidance coming from more than just top down. So what leadership patterns from the past do you think humanity is beginning to question and outgrow?
I think if we're talking about business, I think that I know at our business in particular, we're trying to get out of a lot of siloized thinking and coming into more of a upstream and downstream collaborative thinking. Bring more people into the conversation. Don't just keep it inside of one silo. Break down those walls and let's actually talk about the entire process instead of just one, right? And I think that's really bring more leaders into the conversation instead of it being directed just by one. And I think that brings the unity thinking into it directly. So it's a direct correlation, I think, instead of an indirect correlation. So I think that's a beautiful thing that we're seeing in our own community there at work. And I think I'd love to see it in other organizations as well, not just the work organization, but bring it into communities, bring it into, families. Let's start talking with others and don't just keep it government and as well. Yeah.
I think depending on the industry, I think, obviously going to the military has this, there's a different reason why that leadership structure and the hierarchy structure is there to drive discipline and obviously Jeff, you can speak more to this than anyone on this call. To kind of understand what is needed in very serious and dangerous situations. So that type of leadership structure, I think, has its place. I think in the business world, I think that we're evolving from, at least I hope so, from that always top down structure to now allowing more diverse conversations in order to get away from the siloed structures across most organizations. So allowing people to provide, at least in continuous improvement. I mean, one of the main things when we talk in lean, or one of the elements of lean from a waste perspective, is not including the voice and the talents for people as close to driving the value, right? you want that both in understanding problems and understanding how to remediate or define solutions. And so that theory, I feel like hopefully is something that organizations are in the modern world are embracing, because there's so much value. I've seen it. I've lived through it, where you include everyone as part of the conversation. That's my perspective.
But let me say something else though too. I think that there is still a need for some leaders, because, and I know that's not what you're saying there, Sherri. I know you're not saying, that leadership isn't needed, but I think that there's still a need for a structure of leadership, even if we are going to make it inclusive to more groups. Because I think what I'm seeing as well is that in some instances, we are not seeing a strong enough leadership role. And I think that's just as big of a problem as some of the siloed thinking that we've had in the past, because you still need somebody to take some accountability and some ownership in some situations too. We just need them to be inclusive. And I think that there's definitely a need for leadership to happen. Somebody does need to step up, take ownership and accountability. We just want them to be cooperative in their thinking with other groups, departments, communities, as they do it.
Yeah. So, for sure, not at all saying that leaders. It takes a leader in order to be able to drive that type of view and commitment and culture within an organization. So to your point, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it takes leadership um, to understand the value of bringing a diverse conversation into, from a business perspective, into environments so that everyone, especially people that's close to whatever that value, if we're talking business, that they're driving to the end customer, is has a seat at the table and is helping to formulate or form those ideas, those solutions. So that takes leadership to do that, and that leadership is also um, forming the next set of leaders to also understand the value of being inclusive in conversations and 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 bringing people in. So it all starts with good leaderships. The good leaderships have the vision to see um, how to make that work within organizations and how important it is. So that's what I'm trying to say, and I think that you're agreeing with me in my thoughts. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what you're going to say isn't tied into this, because I'm going to take in a completely different direction otherwise.
No, go ahead. It'll be fun.
It'll be fun. So leadership patterns that humanity is starting to outgrow. I think of more of the religious, spiritual aspect of things, where growing up was taught that basically, you go to church and you learn from the preacher. The preacher has the insight and the information. He's the one who understands it. He's the one who's going to teach you and tell you what it actually says. And I think that we're, as humanity is starting to awaken and starting to question things and realize that some certain things that are said or put out there that are just not really matching up with how the world works. They're starting to question that. They're starting to outgrow that. They're starting to find the answers within themselves. They're becoming leaders to themselves and realizing that it's okay to ask these questions. It's okay to say, do they really know what they're talking about? And it's okay to go down that rabbit hole and learn as much as possible about it, or see what works, what doesn't work. I think we're starting to outgrow this mindset that we have to go and meet at the exact same time each week with like-minded people to be given a specific sermon that's usually prepared and planned out for weeks or months in advance, just giving you the information. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but I think we're outgrowing that. And I think a lot of the people in those positions are struggling. Those leaders are struggling to, how do I continue to, maintain this business? Because let's be honest, it's a business. But I think that's one area where I'm seeing, and it's, you're seeing that in the news. I think people, they're doing all these polls talking about where people are, what religion are they, or do they go to church and things? And you're seeing all that go down. You're seeing all these people say a nondescript, religion. I'm not necessarily religious, but spiritual, things like that. And those numbers are going way up. And that's a huge, evolution, I think.
Well, I don't think what you're talking about is really different at all than what they've talked about, because I spiritualize everything.
Everything is spiritual.
I spiritualize leadership in business. I spiritualize it in government, and have had the opportunity to be a leader in government and business and in religion.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's any difference, to be very honest, in how you approach it. It's I think the biggest issue we bump up against is that humanity is learning that they truly do have the answers within themselves. They don't have to be told. They have it within themselves. Now, sometimes they don't understand that. And I think where a great leader comes in, it goes back to what we talked about over the last week or two about facilitating. A great leader is a facilitator. They're someone with enough experience that they're able to see and help people develop themselves and bring the knowledge and understanding that they need within themselves out, so that they gain confidence in themselves and their decision-making and their guidance that they're receiving for themselves within themselves, right? We are spirit first. All of us are spirit first. In my opinion, we're all God experiencing life from different perspectives. We all have value, and we all have different things that we bring to the collective, to the whole. A great leader, though, has to understand that and be confident enough and not intimidated by and not afraid of allowing people to be and to express and to demonstrate what they are and who they are. And be open to the fact that their way is just a way. It's not the way. For me, in my development as a leader, I've had to learn that I can have a vision, which is beautiful. And I think people seek a vision from leaders, but I don't necessarily have to tell people exactly how or what to do to create the vision. I give them the liberty and the freedom to work within boundaries and move in a common direction toward that vision, which allows them then to be what they are, creators, be a creator. I think leaders give framework, they give structure, they give organization, they facilitate, they protect people so that they can individually contribute without being attacked by someone else who thinks that what they're doing is wrong or different. And that's why I really think, as we've gone through this first season, and we talked about this last week, that one of the key things coming out of this season for me is the critical role of a facilitator. And what I think we may start focusing on as a team of people here and in helping people develop is teaching people how to be facilitators.
Or to be leaders themselves.
Well, that's what I mean, though. But
right.
A leader is a facilitator.
Right.
That's my point.
Right.
That's not what people are taught.
No.
About what it is to be a leader. A facilitator is, and so we'll have to get into this as a topic in a future episode, because my facilitation training was intense. It was the first thing I went through as part of my organizational development training. But I will tell you, it's probably the most important thing and skill I've learned that has allowed me to significantly increase my influence and effectiveness as a person. Those skills. And I think it's important to share it with people. And because my goal as a leader is to develop the people that are with me to be leaders and to be confident and to be self-learning and self-directing. And I don't want to have to manage you all the time.
Well, the best leaders don't make more followers. The best leaders make more leaders.
Right. Exactly.
Right? And that's basically to Joe's point, talking about internet influencers, that the only thing they're looking for is more followers, right? They're always saying, click that like, need more followers, all that crap. That's not the point. They're having influence, but they're not leading. And I think that's what you're talking about. Like, we're trying to create more leaders. You're trying to create that person to build them up so they can be just like that.
Exactly. And I don't honestly care how many followers we have.
Right. It's not the point.
If we're influencing a handful of people who can go out and influence a handful of people, then the network of growth will happen. Right. So the purpose of this podcast is not how many people have subscribed, how many people. If you're listening and this is giving you some way of learning and growing and helping the collective, then this is a big win to me. So, all right. So how what happens when leaders focus on controlling people rather than empowering people?
Well, that's almost that's fear-based leadership, and fear-based leadership usually is just seeking compliance. And I think that if we can change that and make it more love-based, then you facilitate growth. And that's something that I had in pharmacy a lot. So I worked for a big chain when I came out of school, and it was all about metrics. It was all about numbers. How many prescriptions were you filling? How fast were you filling it? What was your error rate? And people just basically were doing it out of fear of basically not hitting those numbers. And ultimately, we're there to take care of a patient, lots of patients. But it's like, if they're so concerned about hitting a certain metric, they're not doing their job. They're doing it out of fear. They're not doing it because they're wanting to do something for that patient. They won't take that extra step to go out into the aisle and talk to the patient and take time, because that kills their numbers on the other side. So you can't have both. So basically, where I'm at now, we don't hover over them. We don't micromanage them with those numbers, because I've learned that if you just take care of the employee, and the company that I work for now does a great job of taking care of employees and giving them what they need, they naturally take care of the patient without having to ask them to. The service that they provide is much better because they aren't scared to death that they're going to get in trouble. And so that, if you come from that mindset of love and, make sure you take care of the patient as best as you can, the service that we provide is much better.
My note on this one was their reign is much shorter, and it isn't secure. And it brought to me the thought of the child's game, follow the leader, right? Where you have a whole bunch of kids and they're playing follow the leader, and that is when one kid gets up and they start doing something, and everybody else is just supposed to follow them and do what they're doing, right? And if they're doing something that's not fun, it's just trying to make them do stuff that's silly or controlling, make them do something that's uncomfortable or something like that. Well, that person's replaced pretty quick, and you bring somebody else in that's more fun and productive and having a good time based on love, not something that's uncomfortable. So you get rid of that person and bring somebody else in that's doing something more fun, productive, and so that's what I put down.
Man, everything I think about starts with the foundation of love. So I think that's what a good leader should kind of start thinking through. And if you're not starting from that perspective of care and want to drive value and understanding of the bigger picture, the bigger goal, understanding that God's given us all free will, and I've been very blessed in my engagement with the people that influence me as leaders. They've always allowed me to, and Jess spoke to that, just, give me the autonomy to really go out and do the thing, take on the challenge and learn and understand. And I think when you have leaders that just want to do control, they're not growing the culture. They're not growing other good leaders. And they're going to be stuck in what Jeff always says, the hairball. So that's my thought.
So I'm going to go back to what you were saying, Joel, about love and fear. A leader who leads with control is someone who is leading out of a foundation or base of fear. They don't have strong confidence in themselves. Their lack of self-confidence puts them in a position where they're afraid of other people and their talent and their abilities. You know, some of the best leaders recognize that the people working for them are actually much more smart. They're much smarter. They're much more capable and competent than even they are. But they recognize that and they learn how to harness that and direct it. One of the leaders I had in the military told me one time, he said, you know, I got mad at him actually because he would go golfing during the day at work. And I'd be working hard trying to get things done. And one day I confronted him. I said, hey, you know, it really makes me angry that you're out golfing during the day. What the heck? What is this? He says, you know what? He said, you should be glad that I'm out golfing and not in your business every day. He says, because you know why? I trust you. He said, I built my team and it's a team of thoroughbreds. And my job is to make sure that all the thoroughbreds are running in the same direction. And as long as you all are running in that direction, I don't bother you. But if you need something, you know, you can come to me, you know, you can. And I took that as, okay, well, now that I look at it from that perspective, yeah, I'm really glad you're not involved in what I do day to day and that you give me the freedom and the ability to do what I need to do. And if I do need something, I can go and you'll get it and help me make sure. So it really changed my perspective of leadership a lot. Now, what I find is that the worst leaders I work with are really busy, which means they're micromanaging, which means that they're in everybody's business and they need to get out of it. The leaders that I find to be the most effective are the ones that are not that busy. They're available. The leader that's available to their people is going to be the most effective leader. If you need me, all you have to do is reach out and I'm available. And if I am so busy that I don't have time for you, I'm not going to lead you. Now that dynamic that's very different than what most people think of as a great or successful leader. But I'm telling you, the less I do, the more effective I am. And I've said that with my work team recently over the last year and a half or so. The less I do, the more effective I am as a leader and the more effective the organization will be because I'm allowing it and facilitating it to do what it needs to do. And I'm available to help it and guide it and direct it. So that is a very counterintuitive position.
I can vouch for, relate to all that because in my new role that I've been in the last couple of years, at first it felt like I had imposter syndrome. And that's what I think some of these leaders have is they think they're not qualified for the role. They feel like they're not qualified. They don't know what they're doing. And they're trying to do too much. Once I've gotten over that feeling of imposter and actually developed into that role, I started making some changes. I wouldn't get in people's business. I would teach them the workflow. I would teach them what they needed to know, and I would back away from it. And I said, I'm always available. And that's the one thing that I've always made myself is available. So if I make changes in a pharmacy system, I need to be available to answer the questions, well, how does this work now? Or what do I need to do in this situation? And the one thing they always tell me is that, you are always the quickest to respond. Out of our entire admin team, when we ask questions to you guys, you're the first one that always responds. We know you'll answer the question. We know you're available and watching and waiting. And I always try to be that. I always try to be present for them to let them know I'm here to help. I don't get in their business every day because they wouldn't want that. But they know I'm here if they need help.
Well, if you when you take the modern productivity mindset many people have, the idea that you have to always be doing,
that was a hard part for me.
To just being available.
Right. Well, to go from being in a pharmacy where I'm constantly cranking out prescriptions and doing something to a more of a desk job, more big picture business workflow type of mindset, it was very hard for me to adjust into those two different roles. So yeah, it was hard for me not to be doing something always.
This last question in this section I think is important, and I don't want to skip it, so I want to make sure we add it. And that is, how do we balance strength with compassion in leadership? Can you be strong, be a strong presence and a strong energy and a strong influence, yet still be compassionate?
You absolutely have to. You have to find that balance. Otherwise, you have a power struggle. You have, but there's going to be titles. There's people who are in charge of certain things and they have certain responsibilities, but it doesn't have to create attention within a team. And that's one thing that I, again, come back to pharmacy because that's my experience. I'm not trained to do anything else. In that tight space where we're working together, I was the leader, but I also basically never treated myself as being more important than my technicians. They were my team. Without them, we would have failed quickly. And so I always made them realize how much I appreciated them, showed them, gave them whatever they needed, kept morale high, kept the energy high, because that was one thing that can deflate a pharmacy and really make it go downhill, was basically that if that energy is low, it's going to affect our product, our service. So I always paying attention, always listening to my technicians and helping them, and empowering them to be the best that they can be. So I always had them practicing at the top of their license, teaching them whatever they needed to be, taught, and worked as a cohesive team. Like I said, I was full and actual charge of the pharmacy, but so were they. I allowed them to be in charge as much as they were allowed to be, and that always empowers them to do their best.
And I think it's absolutely possible and imperative to do so. You have to be able to do that. And you do it by putting a strong team together that both allows you to keep them strong, right? But also keeps you grounded. You have to have people around you that will let you know when you're not being your best, right? Empower them to speak and be part of that team to do their best, but also tell you when you're not doing your best as well.
So just diddle the whole conversation on that. I don't think I had an additional thing. I think it's compassion is a very key element. In order to be a strong leader, you've got to be compassionate. It's my perspective. And that being compassionate allows you to understand how to balance that. Because if you weren't compassionate, you wouldn't be aware of when you're driving something in the wrong direction, the negative direction or something. So I think that you gain awareness through learning how to be compassionate, or learning the understanding of how important compassion is in leadership. So,
well, for me, I think it's important to recognize that the people you're leading are whole people. They're not anybody who thinks that someone can come into their work environment and just shut off the rest of their life doesn't understand people. If you think that people come home from work and don't bring work home with them, you don't understand people. You have to recognize who people are, where they are in their life, what their life is, what they're experiencing in their life at any given time, and realize that you can make decisions that take all of that into account, and you'll make better decisions, and you'll be a much better leader to that person when you recognize and understand them as a whole person. So I think that's a failing, especially in business, that people think you can just turn on and turn off parts of who you are when you walk in or walk out the door. And that's just not the case. It doesn't happen that way. You've got to be understanding of where people are in their life and what they're experiencing as a whole person. So, and I do think you can be strong and still be compassionate, right? So Let's go on to the next section here, which talks about leading from a position of wholeness. I think most of us have experienced leaders that are insecure, leaders that are, in some cases, they're in over their head because they don't have the knowledge that they need to be effective in the levels that they're at. We know that there are people that function primarily from ego and not from spirit, that they don't function as a whole person. So how does self-awareness change the way someone leads? And what happens when a leader acts from insecurity, fear, or ego versus from security, personal, security and love, and from a position of spirit?
For me, I've learned over the last couple of years to pay attention to, how a situation is making me feel, whether that be, I make a change and then I get a lot of resistance. When I first started in this role, I would, new person in a new role and leadership that they weren't used to. So it's a new guy on the scene, and coming in and making changes to their day to day, and they resist that, which is completely normal. But for a while, I would take it personally. I would be frustrated, like why won't they change? Why aren't they understanding this? Why aren't they accepting this? And it would bother me. And I realized that was just my ego. It wasn't where I was coming from was a good place. It was with good intentions, and I knew it would help overall long term. But I was letting my ego get in the way because I wanted I wanted them to embrace it and right away and be like, this is great. And that wasn't the point. I knew there was going to be resistance, because anytime you change any kind of workflow that someone's used to and has a habit or they're just comfortable with, it's going to cause them to be uncomfortable, and they're going to resist that. And it wasn't anything about me. I was making it about me. So I had to go within myself and realize, let go of that. Let go of the desire to always, have people, appreciate what you're doing all the time, or, making everybody happy, because it doesn't happen. You're going to upset people. You're going to get that resistance, and that's okay. That's part of it. From your experience that what you're doing is going to help them long term. You just got to help them through that transition and that uncomfortable period. And once I did that and let go, it really opened me up as far as that position, and also, the respect that I got from other people who said, who knew that once we worked through this, it was going to actually be for the better.
I think it helps you know your weaknesses a little bit more, and it can help you bolster those weaknesses with the right people around you if you're willing to do that. I also think this is one of those shifts from the old ways of thinking to the unity way of thinking, kind of the old power to new power ways of thinking that is currently happening. So I think it's kind of a neat way to bring this in to the section. And it's something that we haven't, that I think a lot of people don't think about a whole lot. And it's definitely a fun topic. So I'm really happy that we're getting into this right now. Fun stuff happening right now in this age.
I just think, just realizing nothing happens in a vacuum. And I think just, coming from a continuous improvement background, I mean, we're taught the importance of, bringing people into the conversation and how that influences your ability to drive change, to drive improvements, to drive not only improvements, but to drive improvements that are sustainable. And I think early on, just going through that journey of just developing into a leader, that experience, that background became very invaluable. And I get going back to Joel's comment, it's like in that vacuum, you can think of all these great things that you think, well, that would be wonderful. But if you don't have the masses behind you on that, you're never going to be able to get it implemented or sustained. So just realizing the value of voice and inclusion in conversations, I think for me became a valuable journey in my development.
Well, internal work we've talked about over the many episodes of this podcast is totally applicable when it comes to leadership. If you don't know yourself, how are you going to know anybody else? You just don't. You don't understand how what you do impacts or influences other people. And when you become aware of that, you now have the ability to, again, use it for good and understand that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. If you're not happy with how people are responding or reacting to you, in most cases, it's not about changing them. It's about something you need to change in how you're approaching them. And I have found that to be some of my greatest successes I've had have come from that realization that, wait a minute, Sherri will give you a couple of specific examples in business where I tried to do something, it was not received well, and I stepped back and said, okay, if that's not going to work, let me find another way to do that will work. And I've had a lot of success creating because I'm aware enough that not everyone thinks the way I think, which was probably the biggest hurdle I had to get over individually, is we all perceive that everybody thinks and sees and processes things the way we do, and they don't. So you have to be flexible enough to allow people to process things in their own way and know that the way you identified to do something it's just a way. It's not the way. That's been so many people in a leadership role, when they have a vision, they also see every single step to get to that vision so they define a path, and they think that's the only path that you can take to get to that point. And that's not true. People can come from a lot of different directions and get to the same endpoint. Who was right? Well, they all are right? They're just different. And a lot of times you've got to be open enough and have enough security to realize that people are going to have different answers and come up with solutions that are just as good, if not better, than yours. So be open to that. Don't be afraid of that. And realize that, the ego wants credit for everything.
Yeah.
There's a great statement that we made in our episode in Awakening this week around leadership, or we will make, because that episode will come out before this one, that says the greatest leaders are not seen. They're really not very well known. But the effects of their leadership are. And the people that do the things that they have been influenced by that leader often say, well, we did it. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I've had to learn to be okay with that. But that is so counterintuitive to the way the world defines leadership and the way the world defines influence today. All right, so we're going to jump into this next great section talking about what Joel touched on in his opening response around servant leadership. Robert Greenleaf described servant leadership with a really powerful idea. He said, the servant leader is servant first. The desire to serve comes before the desire to lead. So what changes when leadership begins with service instead of status?
Well, I think some of the worst leaders are the ones who wanted to be a leader. The desire to want to lead just comes from ego. It comes from a desire of having power and influence. I think the best leaders are ones who are servants first, who understand what it takes to do whatever it is that they're in charge of or responsible for, that can do it, that can step in and do it if need be, that they're not above doing the job of the lowest person on the totem pole, whatever whatever that might be. And that's how I've always led my pharmacies. That there's, when patients come by and they are in shock that I'm sweeping the floors, vacuuming the floors. Like, well, what are you doing? You're the pharmacist. Why are you doing that? Well, because I do all the jobs in here. None of these jobs are below me. In order to take care of this place, we all have to be able to do these things. And I'm no better than this person. It's not required for them to do it. I don't mind to do it. I'm able to do it right now, whatever. So that's always been my mentality. I never like to hear someone say that's not my job. Well, and there's certain times where that comes into play, but in a pharmacy setting, they're literally, a pharmacist is supposed to be able to do any and every job inside that pharmacy. I'm in full and actual charge of all of it, and it's my responsibility to show them from a leadership perspective that I can do this with you. We're in this together. And I think that's it requires you to that leader needs to humble themselves and realize that they're not more important than the other person, no matter who they are. And I think that's where we get into trouble, is when people who are in leadership roles that want that leadership, that desire it, they usually are the dangerous ones.
Totally agree. And I've seen that play out in many, many different environments.
Absolutely. It's those people that forget that we're all the same, We're all one. And you're no better than anyone else. And when I help somebody do something, I don't, just like Jeff said, I don't want the credit for what we just did. I would rather just let that be you. I work to make you shine, right? Because by you shining in what you're doing, it lights that flame for all of us, right? And yeah, I'm not looking for the credit of this. It's not helping me to get that credit. It's helping all of us. And that's how I go about all of the work that I'm doing, right? And I feel good when it just succeeds, and that's enough for me. So, and it's that way if I'm helping somebody on the street, if I'm helping somebody in the community, if I'm helping my wife, my family, my mom, my dad, anything, right? I'm not trying to take that credit. It doesn't matter. Let's just help people, help the situation. And it's amazing how much better you'll feel just when doing something like that.
Well, there's no I in leadership. It's all about teamwork. And as a leader, I would never ask someone to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do myself, both in the business role and then personally. There's never a person that's a stranger to me. There's never a person that I would never reach out to seek advice, to offer a hand, or to do the thing myself. I think it's just it's important to humble yourself at various levels. I feel like that's important in effective leadership.
Well, I have to use Jesus as a great example of what I consider a servant leader. And I think all the stories we have of around his life demonstrate his servant first mindset. I came to serve, not to be served. I came to give, and even when people saw his leadership, they felt his influence. They knew what he was saying was so dramatically more powerful than other people. Even though if you look at his background, you look at his upbringing, there was nothing about him that gave him privilege. He earned that through what he did and did not do. And then when that was seen and felt by people, they wanted to elevate him to a position of leadership and power and influence. And he, at that point, even said, no, I don't want earthly title. I don't want this position. That's not what I'm here to be and do. And oh, by the way, you can do greater things than I'm doing. So anyone who looks at Jesus, and I don't worship him, I love him. I think he is a perfect example of what God has instilled in all of us and expects from all of us. And I think that's the exact lesson he came to teach us, is that we all have influence. We all have this within ourselves. And it's not for our good, it's for the good of the collective. We benefit, yes. You get by giving. That is so difficult for people to understand. When you're giving, you're not depleting yourself, because the store is abundant. We live in abundance. Love is abundant. You can't give enough love. You can't outgive the universe when it comes to love. And that whole concept, if the world were judging Jesus today as to whether or not he was successful, he would have been considered by the world a miserable and utter failure. But how much influence has that life had?
Substantial.
It's probably the most significant life that you can put a finger on today. And all of that from humble beginnings, all of that from a position of service, all of that from a position of spirit and oneness and unity and love. Perfect example to me. I always tell people, the Bible is a great leadership book. It's a great leadership and management book. And Jesus is a great example. Not in so many ways. So for anyone out there who thinks that we don't love Jesus, or that we are, we do, probably more
so
than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And I value the example and the lessons and the leadership that he has given the world to build from. So how do you empower people rather than create dependency? I find a lot of times that leaders, they want followers. To your point earlier, you said, leaders, it's not about followers. I don't want people to be dependent on me, because that creates a relationship that is draining and straining and difficult to manage long term. Yet I know people, and I know you know people, they want people to be dependent on them.
Yeah, I have one of those in a high level position right now. Like, he wants everything to go through him. He wants every decision, every thing that we're doing to go through him. And he's not even a pharmacist. He's just a business executive. And it's draining. It causes issues. He wants that power, and that's why it's so damaging sometimes. But to empower people instead of creating dependence, you have to give them the tools to be successful. You have to teach them what they need to know. You have to give them the resources that they need to do the job that they do. Because without it, you're basically already handcuffing them from being able to have that kind of power, or to have that kind of leadership in themselves. So you have to cultivate it. You have to put them into an environment of growth as opposed to compliance. And as long as you provide for them what they need, you can let go, and they will take it their own way, and usually not ways you're expecting, and that's okay. To your point, I mean, sometimes they get there a different way, but they may get there a way you didn't think about, or that may be better than what you even thought. So detach from the outcomes and try not to control everything, because sometimes when you try to control everything, you lose control of it.
You never had it anyway.
Right. That's all. It's just a facade. It's
You never had control anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's through education and example, right? Teach them and show them.
And empower them. So I'll add another word to Joe's ideal use.
Yeah, exactly. I agree too.
just empower them with support. Be there for them. Let them know you're there.
I tell my team, I'm going to ask you to do something, but then I'm going to turn around and say, now, what can I do to help you?
Mhm.
How can I help you? What do you need to know? What knowledge do we need to get? What tools do we have to have? How can, and that's our job as a leader, is to become the servant. I've always believed that the hierarchy, the pyramid, the triangle, I've always believed that the hierarchy, the pyramid, the triangle in the best organizations is inverted. It's inverted. And that is a powerful organization when the leaders see themselves as servant of all. So, we know we've got leadership in a lot of different areas of life. There's leadership in government. There's leadership in religion. There's leadership in education. There's leaderships in family. There's leadership in healthcare. There's leadership in business. And some people have greater skills and ability to lead in any of those different roles. Some can lead in many different roles. Some people are just natural leaders. Some people gravitate to them regardless of what role or position that they happen to be in at any given time. And if there's one thing this world needs today, it is good, strong, healthy, whole leadership. I truly believe a lot of the suffering we're experiencing in the world today is because of leadership that is much more ego-driven than driven from a position or state of wholeness. And it's separation mindset versus unity mindset. But I believe that the work we're doing, the work that many people are doing, I think the fact that people are questioning that at this point because it is so uncomfortable, it is so unpleasant, and it's becoming so obvious that it's that way, that ultimately, the world is going to transition. So I think maybe one of the greatest acts of healing is becoming the person that we once needed. Become the person that you've needed, right, to lead you. So what qualities do you wish every leader embodied?
I wish that a leader would know themselves, because they have to come from a place of wholeness in order to basically give from that same space, to understand who they are, what they bring, how they interact with everyone, and to understand that even when they're having a bad day, they can, know that, they sense that, don't react from that space, because they know that's not their full self. They're not, their cup is running low, because you can't give what you don't have. So, just an inner knowing of themselves, I think, is a huge part of it. And I think when someone knows themselves, they're going to come from a more humble place. They're going to come from a place of servitude more so than they would if it was more ego driven and mind driven.
Lead with love. Include whoever you're leading in decisions, and be transparent. Be available. But mostly lead with love.
I mean, it's a different way of saying it, the same words, but just lead with compassion, realizing that people are in different places and within their lives and in their journeys, and understanding and the willingness to want to seek an understanding of that is very important. Engaging everyone in the dialogue, giving people the free will or autonomy to come with ideas and to illustrate their knowledge and their ability to drive value, I think, is very important. Um, lead with direction, and support, um, and understand that no one's perfect. Uh, that if we were, we would never have the need to be taught anything, right? So you learn from mistakes and you grow from mistakes, and just having that space to give grace and to allow for future development and ongoing growth, I think is important.
Well, certainly love is a foundation of what I think every leader should be building on, and the belief and understanding that we are all connected. I think it's so critical that a leader realize that we are all connected in every facet and form, that there really are no boundaries, there are no barriers, there are no walls, there are no nations, there are no barriers that truly separate us. Those are all in our mind. They're all made up. And when they recognize oneness and that life is about flow and how to help people get into that flow and maximize their value and potential that they came into this world to exhibit, because I believe everyone came here to learn, to grow, to exhibit great purpose, then, this world will become heaven on earth. So as we close this conversation, maybe leadership was never meant to be about standing above others. Maybe true leadership is really standing with others. It's not, as Purna has said in the times past, she said, it's not power over, it's power with. So seeing what's possible, sometimes before they can even see it themselves, creating space where people can remember their gifts, their worth, their light, because a leader that's rooted in unity does not create followers. They help awaken that leadership ability in others. So Joel, Joe, Sherri, again, as always, thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experience, your life and knowledge, your example to everyone listening. And to everyone that is listening, remember, someone is always experiencing the world through your presence. So I hope that you'll take this conversation and in every circumstance you have opportunity, lead with kindness, lead with courage, lead with love. And with that, the space between continues. As we come to a close, remember that this journey continues in many expressions. This podcast is part of a family of partner podcasts. Awakening Heaven on Earth. The space between heaven and earth and Living Heaven on Earth are 3 companion podcasts exploring spiritual awakening from complementary perspectives. Awakening Heaven on Earth offers the core teachings and mystical reflections on unity, love, and conscious living. The space between creates room for dialogue, reflection, and lived conversation around those teachings. Living Heaven on Earth focuses on basic spiritual practices that help embody these insights in daily life. Together, they form a unified journey of understanding, experience, and integration, inviting listeners to remember their connection with the divine, with one another, and with the living world. You can find all of them available on the same podcast streaming platforms wherever you listen. And if music helps carry these teachings deeper into the heart, the Unity, Awakening Heaven on Earth album is available on all major music streaming services as a musical companion to this journey. Wherever you engage, through listening, reflection, conversation, or music. May it gently remind you you are not separate. You belong to the one life, and heaven is already unfolding within you. Until next time, walk gently, love deeply, and embody heaven on earth.